This video is for those who would like to better understand the Rhino 7 interface, in particular the parts that are next to the viewport. So the sidebar here, the snaps, which in a standard view are usually at the bottom. I have mine on the left-hand side out of preference. And then on the right-hand side, these panels and also the selection filters, which are also not usually available. I've put mine into underneath the panels out of personal preference. So let's get to it. The toolbars that you see here, these I've constructed specifically for my students. I'll explain them a little bit later. So I'm going to move them out of the way. I'm going to dock them in the top in the ribbon bar just for now. And then, so I'll start with the sidebar. The sidebar will be visible using all of the toolbar group tabs. So if I go to any one of these, you'll see nothing happens in the sidebar until I get to curve tools, in which case you get all of the commands available in curve tools on the left-hand side, or at least most of them. And then the same would go for surface tools, solid tools, sub-D tools, etc. So back to standard, because these, as I've explained before in a previous video, these commands or these tools contain just about all of the tools that you might need. So let's begin by understanding somehow how this is arranged. You should be able to discern that there's sort of a grouping. The first 10, so 3, 6, 9, and then this last one, are all about sketching and selection. So the first one is just the cursor. Second one is points. The third one is lines of various sorts. And you have this cascade triangle in the right corner. If you click on it, you'll get all of the commands inside that toolbar group. And you can actually drag the toolbar group out and then use whichever command you want. And then you can close it again. So the third one is the freeform curves. These go from control point curve to curves that you would be able to use on a surface, to things like tween curves, and then some mathematical equation-driven curves like parabolas, hyperboles, foci, and catenaries. Then circles with the same sort of cascading. We will be using this deformable circle in particular, and I'll explain why a bit later. Ellipses, arcs, rectangles. This one's interesting at the end, a rounded rectangle tool, which enables you to round the rectangle's ends with fillets. And then polygons. Polygons, if you want to know how to draw a circle, make a polygon with 3 sides and you'll get a triangle. And then the last one is all of the commands which connect or manipulate curves. So if you have a polyline like that, that's called a polyline. You'll see it says one open curve, although it doesn't say polyline. But if I break it apart, it says 2 segments, so 2 curves. And if I rejoin it, it becomes a single curve, open curve. So that's where you would use your fillet curves, right? So you click on those 2, and there is a fillet in there. So all of the commands you need here are in this, to manipulate curves are in this section, all the way down to some analytical tools and some to do with surfaces as well. And then the one we're going to use quite a bit is rebuild curve, and I'll explain whatever else we need later. Then the next set of commands, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all have to do with surfaces or solids. So the first one is all of the major surface commands. We're going to be using these 5 at the top mostly. And you can also, contrary to what I claimed in an earlier video, you can make objects without creating sketches, like I'm creating here a 4-sided plane. Right, so you see if I move that out the way, there is no sketch underneath it. It's just the plane. Next to it are all the commands which you would use to either manipulate or join or do something to the planes that you already have. So that's the fillet one. Here is the chamfer. You can extend a surface. You can blend surfaces. That's adding a third surface between two other surfaces. And then we'll be using the rebuild surface command a little bit as well later on. Then the solids. So the solids work. Let's just show you how this works. You will just be asked to, in this command line, you'll be asked to do something like base of cylinder, right? So that's this. I'm going to use it as the 0 point, which I've created a point at. And you just drag out, in this case, a circle, and then it'll immediately skip to the extrude tool, and you'll be able to extrude that circle into a solid. Another way of doing this kind of command, or of doing any command, is to actually input figures. So I can choose the base of my circle, then I can input, let's say I want a diameter of 50, input 50, and then I want a height of 100, so I enter 100, and there I have a cylinder with a diameter of 50 and a height of 100. These are the Boolean union tools, or Boolean tools, should I say, and so there's a whole lot. There are also other ones like the fillet edges, chamfer edges, wire cut. So this isn't, sorry, it's not just Booleans, it's, I'm not sure what it's called. Anyways, it allows you to do all kinds of things with solids or poly surfaces. I think there is also a, where is it? No, not going to find it now. Right, so I'll have to get this bit out. Right, so this is, what's it called? I'll have to get this name. Let's just get properties. Solid tools. So this is the solid tools. These are the solids, right? And this is the solid tools toolbar group. It allows you to do things like Boolean or Boolean union or Boolean intersection. Create solids, which is very useful. We're going to use it. Cap planar holes and extract surfaces, which we'll also use. And then things like wire cut. Next one is getting curves from objects, in particular surfaces. So here you can get you can duplicate an edge, duplicate a border, you can get a wireframe, etc. And then the last one is the mesh tools. We're not going to use that at all. Then the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 commands are all kind of standalone. They're essential for other operations which have to do with, like in this case, union and, well, join and explode, which is like stitching and unstitching things that you want, which are separate. Trimming and splitting of surfaces, and then grouping and ungrouping. And then these last two are very similar. I'm not actually sure what the difference is. I think this one only applies to curves, whereas this one applies to all objects. All editable objects, such as surfaces. So just to illustrate how that works, let's draw a control point curve and close it. And you'll see, as it stands at the moment, those control points are not visible. The moment I select this item, the control points are visible, and I can select them by dragging, selecting, or clicking on one of them and moving about. If I want those control points to remain visible, I can use this one. All right, so that's the difference. So these are attached to the curve, okay, as you can see. And let's switch that off, points off. Right click to point them off, and this gives you the control points which lie outside of the curve. So I learned something today. And so if you want those control points, or those, what are the other ones called? Curve edit points, to remain visible, you would use these two buttons here. Delete that, and then that's for 3D text. We're not going to deal with it right now. Then the next drop down or cascading toolbar set contains all of the commands that you will see in the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think it's 6, 7. In fact, so that one there covers all of these. Here you'll see there's the copy command, there's the rotate 2D command, here are the scale commands, right? So there's scale. The analyze direction is the only one which is not in here as far as I can see. And then the array tool is in here as well. So that's for doing things like moving, transforming, bending, flowing along surface, curve, orient curve to edge. So I'll deal with some of these in our modeling project. And then this last, well, that one there is an analysis tool and allows you to see the direction of curves, which is sometimes important, and definitely direction of surfaces. This is a curvature graph, which allows you to see how smooth the curve is. And then you've got measurement tools and other analytical tools. This last one here on the left-hand side is a repeat of the analytical tools. These two in particular are going to be very useful. That's to show if you have a watertight object or not, solid, and that's to show if a curve is closed or not. These last two on the right, we're not going to use blocks at all, and the history we're going to deal with in this panel at the bottom. So then the snaps work. Let's create just a line, a single line, and let's repeat that. By the way, to repeat a command, you just right click or you hit the enter button and it'll repeat the command. So currently I have my snaps chosen as end, near, point, mid. You can deselect all of these by saying disable, and then you can click again to enable them all. For instance, if I wanted to select just one of these, I can right click in it. It'll deselect everything else. So I'm going to use the mid command, and you'll see now I can't select the end of this line, but if I click on the end command, I can. Okay. So the way to get everything back is to just disable and then right click twice and then click disable again, and everything is now ticked. Some of these I definitely don't want. So the ortho will mostly constrain you to the axes. Okay, so you can see it's quite difficult for me to get out of these axes, but if I'd drawn something like this, I can actually get that to snap to that point. If I started this again and I went from a point to another point, I can still override the orthographic constraint. Although the orthographic will, unlike planar, which is this one here, planar, if I leave it on, will draw inside a plane, but if I take the point out, say into another view, I can draw outside of that plane. So you'll see that now I have an object which is not planar anymore. Planar just means in one plane. All right. Then the Osnaps, which I've explained already, you can switch them on or off. So Osnaps just refers to that panel there. The Smart Track one is very useful. I use it all the time. So let's just draw a line like this. I'm holding the shift button down. So let's go to this one here. I'm holding the shift button down to keep it perpendicular or horizontal, or if there's a snap, I think it'll also do it to that snap. No, right. So that's vertical and horizontal constraint. You just hold the shift button down. So let's do that again. And this time I want to draw a triangle. So I'm going to go from the end because I've got my end snap enabled. And now I want to draw a right triangle from that point upwards. But because I have no way of getting this to connect, I'd have to judge it by eye. To make sure that I can connect those two or have a guideline, I switch the Smart Track on, and then I just hover my cursor over that point and drag out, and you see that there is this white line. You can change the color, by the way. I've got mine as white, of the guideline. So that's terribly useful. I use it an awful lot. Then the gumball. The gumball is a fantastic tool. There are quite a few people who don't like it, but I'll explain why I like it, and then you can decide for yourself. So the gumball has these two arms, and on the arms are arrows at the end, a sort of a little dot in the middle, and then this waffle in between the two arms. The arms turn black once you've selected both arms, or if you select one arm, that means whatever you do is going to go in that direction. So if I select on the waffle, it means whatever I do will go in any direction, although it's not in any direction in any plane. It's only in any direction in this plane. So let's just explore the waffles quickly in the perspective view. So you'll see I can select my waffle and watch what happens in the top plane as I try and move that object. It'll appear to move at random. So let's just get that movement at random in the perspective view, but in the top plane you can see it's kind of constrained to that plane's orientation, the x-axis. So if I do the same thing in the the y-axis, you'll see I can go up. As you see in the top view, it goes up, but nowhere else. Right, so that's what the waffles do, allow you to have some sort of degree of freedom, or 2 degrees of freedom of movement, but not the third. Now, what's interesting about the gumball is that, let's go from the move ones. Instead of moving freeform, I can also click on the end of this arrow and enter in a figure and hit the enter button. And it'll do it for me. I can make that do a negative figure as well. I can also enter a formula into this. So I can say 20 times 2. So it'll instantly multiply that for me. What else I can do with this is, if I want to extrude it, of course I can drag, extrude. But what you can also do is you can click on the extrude button in the direction you want to go and make whatever you want to extrude in that direction by that amount. So that's terribly useful. Then to explain these scaling bars, these work in the same way. You can click drag, sort of in a freeform fashion. Let me just switch this record history off for now. Okay, and then you can hold the shift button down, and you'll be able to scale in 2 directions. There we go. Okay. But I can also click on this item and say, well, scale it by 2 in that direction. Or I can hit the shift button down, click on here, and then say, scale it by 2 in both directions. So very neat. This tool is very, very neat. Lastly, you have this rotate arc, which you can drag freeform if you want. You can actually see at the bottom, I don't know I can't use my mouse to show you, but here where the millimeters sign shows, let's just go back, you'll see the degrees being reflected. So I can eyeball this, or as with the other features, I can actually type in what I want. I want it to rotate by 45 degrees. I get 45 degrees. That's the gumball in a nutshell. There are other things you can do with it. If the 2 arms, or I think it's on, let's see if we can do it with the waffle. If you hold the control button down when both arms are highlighted black, you should be able to drag. Yes, you can. You can drag this to a different point. However, what I did is I dragged it from the waffle. But if I want to drag it from this point, I hold the control button down and drag to that point. And that's useful because now I can rotate from this point rather than from the center. Okay, so that's the gumball in a nutshell. There are some very good videos which I can point you to, which might show you some other tricks you can use the gumball for. And then record history. It records history. I will not explain it here, but I will explain it in our modeling video because we're going to use it. Okay, so I'm just going to move this back to 0. Right, so what I did there, let's just go do this. I selected that point, started moving it, and then I hit the 0 button to tell it where I wanted it to go, and then hit the enter while my mouse was holding it. Okay. And then what else do you need to know? Yeah, yes, this one here. Next to the units, that's the units we're using as millimeters. That's been set inside this options bar. I will show you more about that later. So here I can hide, or I can control let's get this out the way. I can control what layers I'm using and whether to put something on a different layer. So so you can actually change object layer, right? So let's go back here. So this layer 1 is active and layer 3 is not active, but it is visible. But if I make it invisible, that point will disappear. It's there, it's just hidden in that layer. Okay, so with that, then we can move on to the layer panel on the right-hand side, which is exactly the same as what I've just shown you here. You can double-click on a layer. These are layers which I've given you. These are not the standard ones. You can double-click in this name bar, and you can change the name by typing in whatever you want. I like to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then that's because sometimes you can right-click on this item and you can create a sub-layer. Then I would have 1.1, whatever, and I'd say lines, and then I'd do another one with circles or whatever makes sense to you. But that's the naming is I'm just showing you that it's available. You can change the color of a layer by clicking in this little black button on the right and then selecting a color. Okay, so I resize this. And now everything that's on that layer will be that color. So if I draw, there we go, that item is now that color. But let me just show you something else. Let's go one to the left to the properties bar. And then this gives you the characteristic properties of whatever it is you've selected. So right at the top, you can give this a name if you want to, and this is very useful sometimes. It'll tell you what layer it's on. You can actually change the layer, I think. Yes, if I select this one, it'll actually put it onto layer 3. So let's go to layer 3 and hide layer 3, and that'll make that disappear. Okay, so let's go back to this. Select that item. It's on layer 3. I want to put it back on layer 1. That's what I've done. The display color is currently by layer, so whatever the layer color is, I can change this by clicking on this with the left button and selecting one of these colors, or selecting my own color, creating your own color. Right, so that item there is on a layer which is this sort of reddish brown color, but I've made it a properly brown color, so that's what you can do. And then the other bits and pieces, you can change the line type. So let's make it a dashed line. There it is, a dashed line. I can change the print color. That won't affect anything on screen, but when you print, it'll print it in that color. And you can change the print width. Similarly, will not see it happen on screen. You have to type in a command, but it will change the print width when you print. Useful when you're doing PDF prints, you'll actually see the difference. I think that about covers it. The only other thing we have to talk about is these selection filters. They work in the same way as the snaps do, in that if you want to just filter one item, so let's create 3 items here. So I've got a curve. Let's just make this curve into a solid line again, continuous. Okay, I've got a curve, I've got a surface, and I've got a point. If I select them, you'll see that it tells me in the history command bar. I always forget what this is called. Anyways, here at the top, 1 point, 1 curve, 1 surface added to selection. Now, if I right-click on this selection filter bar on curves, I can only select curves. So you'll see I've selected a curve. It says 1 open curve added to the selection. It works in the same way as that, in that you can also, when you right click again, it'll go back to whatever it is you've decided you want as your choices, and you can disable them like that. And there are a few other things that you can do, like with sub-objects. I'm not going to explain that for now, but this is also useful because if you have a whole lot of objects and you just want to, say, select the surfaces, sorry, right-click to that one. Now I can select just the surfaces. Okay, right, I think that covers it. If there is anything I'm missing out, one other thing. Just a quick explanation for my students of what I've done in these toolbar groups. I've selected the most used commands in what I believe is the most used order in which you're going to use them. So there are these transform commands, move and rotate, then the join and explode, then the line tools of various sorts, together with one or two of the selection of ways to change these lines. Then this curve boolean, which is, I forget where I got it from, but it's used quite often, very useful. Then we have things like trim, split, the mirror tool. So here are some more transform tools: the mirror, copy, array, scale 1D and 2D, and then the rebuild ones, which are actually very useful. And then right at the end, I've got this show object control point. So to me, the ones you're going to use the most are move and show object control points, although the move you might do using the gumball. And then the second set of toolbars, these are all tools to make solids, curves, sorry, not curves, surfaces and solids. And then these ones here are to manipulate them. And the third one is analytical. I'm not going to explain those, with some dimensions. And then the fourth one is sub D. So these we're gonna focus on just using these ones in our exercises, and I hope you can download my setup files. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.